the thing that I'm most excited about right now is other than all this stuff, but a lot of this stuff is like you're just grinding through building the open world. You're just grinding through building all this stuff for years, and wanting to work the FPS mechanics, all these different types of things. But we spent there's a lot of and I'll kind of get into the open world a little bit right now, but there's a lot of everyone's like talking about the metaverse and it's so exciting, and back in 2021, and everyone's kind of dreaming of these different ideas, and obviously you know very little of it has materialized. There's a number of companies, like there's Metagravity and there's Immutable, and there's these companies saying, hey, we can have 100,000 users in the world, and everybody's in the world at the same time, and that's kind of like what the metaverse is. You can have concerts and all these types of things. And as we were building out a lot of the multiplayer pieces, and we're working through a lot of the different gameplay and things like that, as well as AI has come online in a very significant way, and we're using a lot of AI for the actual um, for the economy, which is another part of Metropolis in terms of the how players can participate in creating items for the world, and Aura and Wyoming Fun. We can talk about all of that, but there's been insane progress there, and Aura will some of the wilders had early access to Aura, but things are already being minted on chain in terms of 3D generated assets, and sort of a really important part of it. But the other side of AI is actually agents, and actually Elon was talking about this on Joe Rogan the other day, where he was just saying, you're going to be able to have these very expressive experiences where you can talk to these NPCs and you can build relationships with them and these types of things. And I think that that's really kind of a new area of if you look at. I was also just watching the GTA founder talk through like the dialogue and just how they made GTA feel so real. And it's a lot of manual work in terms of building out the dialogue trees and the stories and the backgrounds of characters and all those types of things. And I think there's a really interesting design space there for AI, where it's not so much. My thesis now is kind of like, I don't think it's going to be yes, there'll be multiplayer. Yes, you'll want to come in with your friends. Yes, there'll be large concerts and these types of things. And multiplayer is very important. But I think more than not, people are going to want to come in, and they're going to want to have new, different types of experiences, which are different than what they would experience in the real world. It's not just like taking the real world and like putting it into the digital space. It's saying, okay, what can you natively do? The real world's actually pretty awesome. You know what I mean? Going to concerts is pretty awesome. It's going to be pretty hard to compete with. I'd way rather go to a concert in real life than go to a concert in the metaverse, because that's a native IRL experience that is amazing, that has evolved over gazillions of years. So I think what's the alternative for that in sort of a digital space? I do think it's this interactivity with AI agents, and both having your own agents that you can deploy that can do productive tasks for you, or can enhance your experience, but also that you can interact with. That could also be enemies or whatever the case may be. So one of the first. So obviously we've been building Zero. We've been building this whole decentralized network for managing communications, managing. It's sort of like a decentralized way to manage different services, and Zero has really been like the first prototype for, okay, can you have a chat app and a social media app and all these different things, and can you build that in a way that is distributed and decentralized, where it's not all sitting in one data center. You have things living in different locations, and just like I can run a validator on a blockchain, or I can run an Ethereum node or a Bitcoin node. Can I run some part of the metaverse? And so we've been building this. Right now, we're just, it's been referred to as the grid. It's been referred to as zones. We've been working on this for 4 or 5 years now. But where we're where we're getting to right now is we have kind of prototypes internally where you can run your own AI. You can run that AI on a node, and then you can participate in the economic value of that with that that AI agent. And it could be, a Uber driver, it could be a form agent, it could be, any NPC essentially in the world. um, will Every NPC in the world, I can say this definitively now, will be owned. And so that is a really, really big thing. And we've been working through that for a really long time. We haven't talked about it that much, but it's now like 100% the case that you will be able to own that particular NPC. That NPC will have, a backstory. It'll have different skills, different capabilities. There'll be different ways in which you can interact with that NPC, kind of like a Tamagotchi. And there's this whole separate experience that we're planning to release in Q1, which is the Wilder World app. And that's kind of more the degen experience, if you will. And that experience will be that you can own your various assets on chain essentially, and you can basically uh, interact with those agents. And there will be we're going to, at least initially, have it be so that you can have an economic experience with that agent, if that makes sense. So I can kind of get into some of the missions and stuff and how that will work. But when you get into the open world, how it will work is you'll get your initial experiences as a bounty hunter. So you're a bounty hunter, and the city starts to become, you know, starts to become under attack by the form, and there are these breaches, as we've mentioned before. But there are these they're sort of like slowly setting up camp in the city essentially, and you get pinged off that, oh, there's been, they've taken over this area, and you have to go deal with that particular threat. And there will be an economic exchange where, how, the weapons you use, the items you use, those items are up for grabs, and there'll be different difficulty settings essentially. But if you lose your items, well, you actually lose those items on chain, and those items will go to the agent on the other side, and somebody will actually own that agent, and so somebody will then own that resource essentially. So just, you could think of like a two-sided market. In crypto, you have the bulls and the bears, and there will be these emergent missions that happen all around the city, and you will need to go in, you will need to compete, and there will be something you're putting at risk there, essentially, in terms of the value of your items. But the other side of that is, if you thwart that attack, and you basically are able to fulfill the bounty, you'll receive a wild bounty, and you'll actually earn income, and that goes to you. So you can kind of see this, the initial, and there's lots of other use cases for like um, how the game will work essentially. But there's basically um, two-sided factions. So you have players. Players are trying to protect the city from, thwart of the form essentially. And then you have agents, which are trying to take over the city. You have AI kind of trying to take over the city, but there's people outside of the game that control those agents essentially. And that will be a much more passive experience. Well, they'll just have the AIs, like, they'll just, on your phone, you'll have a bunch of agents you're controlling. You might check in on them once a day or once a week or whatever the case may be. But it allows a much more passive, non-crypto native or crypto native uh, non-gamer to basically participate in the game and participate in that side of the economy. So a lot of the initial testing that we'll be doing in the open world is bringing that gameplay together, and then having those missions. And I think that, your original question was about Metropolis, but I really do think that this will be the heart of Metropolis, because what we've been thinking about is, we're like, well, like, how do we become successful in crypto is one question. How do we make the game super fun? How do we do something that actually hasn't been done before, and that's not just, okay, this is just another game, and it's just the same as everything else. And I really think it is related to this two-sided economy that will emerge essentially between players and between NPCs. And it'll basically start off with this. this game mode behind it. But if you can, the more people you have on both sides of the economy, the more transactions there will be, the more value that will be exchanged, the more opportunity there is, the more different types of strategies there'll be, and so on and so forth. So we are really then from that perspective, you're really looking at it like a two-sided market where it's like, okay, you have players on one side, you have people controlling the agents on the other side, and then you have, and you can just imagine things getting increasingly complex, and then there'd be a third part of the market eventually that comes online, which is the creators on the other side, where they're actually creating things, essentially creating items, creating objects, 3D assets, etc., and they're participating in the economy from that perspective. So you can kind of think of the player as the person using the system. You can think of the person funding the agents as kind of like the investor, and then you can kind of think of the person creating the assets as like the creator, basically. And there being like these three kind of main meta roles in terms of the whole economy.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Very excited to learn more about how these NPCs will evolve and how everything will tie into Metropolis long
But
term.
I think that just on that, like, because at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, like, how do we build a massive economy? Like, it's like if you think of anything that's become successful on a global scale, there is a huge economy around it. So, for instance, like look at Bitcoin, or look at New York City, or look at anything essentially. So, what we realize with crypto is we realize, like, well, there's if you just have this token that doesn't do anything or just does a little bit, which I would say is 99% of projects, the things that are generating the actual value, where crypto is a good use case for and they can survive and be sustainable, is really like platforms that facilitate either the creation of tokens or the exchange of tokens. And so if you look at where all of the money is going in the crypto space, it's the exchanges basically are making all the money. It's outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana and a handful of others. It's like the exchanges, the market makers, and the stable coins. Basically, those are kind of the main players. They control the market. Most of the value gets captured by those groups because they don't care if things go up or things go down. They just clip a fee off every single transaction, or the main chains. And so, from our perspective, for Wild, we're like, okay, well, the more, if we're trying to create the economy, it's less about just doing one specific thing, and it's more about like, how do we create economic opportunities and arbitrages for lots of different people, but also lots of different AIs? Because the place where AIs will live is natively in the metaverse, essentially. That's, or in the virtual simulation, or whatever you want to call it. But that will be the native place for these agents to transact. And so if we can create like a visual layer on top of that for this like vast intelligence network, that becomes very, very powerful. And then we can also scale up a lot of NPCs in terms of, a lot of agents. People can be running a lot of agents inside of the world. And then that can get us to our first, say, million active wallets by everybody controlling all these agents that are interacting in the world, and then people can participate in the economy that way. And what that means is, like, even if we can't get, while we're starting, like a huge player base on the traditional platforms, we're obviously not on console. You can't use Wilder World on a Mac. We've chosen to build this very high fidelity world that where you need like high hardware and stuff like that. Plus, it's also quite competitive. If we can build this economy and we can build this intelligence network, and it kind of can be expressed and kind of communicated and shown in Wilder World, but underneath it, we can say, well, actually, if you look at where most of the money in the economy is going, it is data centers, it is AI, it is all of these various things. That's where most of it's like AI is like a black hole, just sucking everything into it in terms of the actual economy. And we think that that's just going to continue. We're like, well, this can actually bootstrap, a fully decentralized network where you can be running AI, because where's the biggest network of GPUs in the world that aren't actually being used right now? It's gamers. They're just sitting on idle GPUs in their house while there's like actually GPU shortages everywhere else. And so if we can prove out the thesis that through this amazing experience that we built, this virtual simulation, which has always sort of been the thesis, is like if we can also build out if we can also build out the infrastructure and say, hey, yeah, but we also have the infrastructure that's powering all of this stuff, and that all ties in via the economy. That's extremely powerful, and then that's a very metaverse is not a hot narrative. Web3 gaming is not a hot narrative. But if we can show, hey, we're able to build a network that is benefiting and is going to also accelerate AI, then it becomes a completely different story for us. And we can kind of tap into that opportunity, and we can become a leader in that opportunity. So in terms of AI, I've been talking a lot about the AI asset generation and Aura and all of that type of stuff, Wyoming.fund. Like, we are working on all of that, and that stuff's very close to shipping, like extremely close. But also on the other side, the thing we haven't been talking about as much is this AI agent network. And we're really going to see, you're going to see in Q1, essentially, you'll see it by the end of the year, but you'll really start to see these AIs come online where you can actually, run and own your own AIs in the network. And then you can go into the game and the AIs are actually in there, but you can also interact with them from through your phone. And I think that is just, and this is not like years away. This is like, months away kind of thing. So you know, I think that's going to be very exciting, and it kind of changes the whole thought like of the economy, because even like our accounting team was building some automations with AI, and they're building this AI agent to help with managing certain admin tasks and stuff like that. I was like, okay, like that could be a character in the metaverse that is like sitting in a building that's like doing that actual work. And so it seems kind of funny, but like that is a AI already. It's sitting somewhere in a data center, and it's going through and it's processing those things. Or if you use Claude Code or you use any of these coding systems, that's an AI agent somewhere that's using compute that's actually doing those activities. Okay, why couldn't we express that as a character, where now that AI agent has a personality, they have all these things, and they're actually in the metaverse, and they're also natively on chain, and the infrastructure is distributed. Um, so I think like we're gonna release all of this stuff, and it's gonna be amazing. And then the open world's gonna come, and it's gonna be amazing. And that's all gonna be very visual and exciting, and I think incredible. But I do think that it kind of opens up like the next. We've been working towards that for 4 years. It's like, okay, well, what's next? Okay, we've shipped the open world. Like, of course there's going to be lots of things to do, but like, really, what's next? What does the future look like 5 to 10 years from now? And it's like, well, if we can build the biggest network of in the world of AI agents and digital intelligence that's living within Wilder World, that's doing these productive tasks, that's really powerful. And we can start to roll out a lot of that stuff and test a lot of that stuff via the simulation. So for people that have been here for a long time, this is probably like not a surprise. It's like, hey, we've been talking about this for a long time. But I really do think that that completely flips the switch, because what if in like a year we could have 10 million, okay, there's X number of players and there's X number of people acting, but what if there's 10 million agents, and all of those agents are actually doing some productive task, and then those agents are all owned by people in the world? um, I think that that's completely possible, and would kind of really help reposition and get take us to a completely new level, essentially, in terms of how people are thinking about Wilder World. Frank, do you want to add anything to that? That was a lot.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think to just paint a picture and to tie it into some of the existing stuff we've done as well is like, and then, yeah, more of what's to come with like the generative tools. You can imagine essentially like owning a shop. You own a residential plot in Miami, and then you own a shop, and then you produce some type of good or service. So, for example, let's say you have like a clothing store. Um, So you're actually like producing the things that can be sold in that clothing store, and then you're producing some personality for the person inside that store. And then you can imagine just driving down the street and walking into a store and like buying a t-shirt or whatever. And then one person actually kind of owning and managing that whole stack from outside of the game, I think is uh it's actually a pretty simple concept, but like connecting the dots, I think, is where it gets interesting. And then um, I think once you are like driving down the street in the open world, you'll start to see, oh, okay, like all these buildings will actually be occupied soon, and this is a part of the way in which we can do that. So super cool.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, and that's just like you'll have your assets. So you can think of assets as and the Wilder World app we're building, which will integrate into Zero and it'll integrate into Aura, but these will ultimately be different apps. So there'll be the Wilder World app on your phone, and you'll be able to see all your assets. You'll be able to see um, your wallet balance. But you'll also be able to see these AI agents that you're owning that are actually doing things, which is pretty interesting.